being the head coach is a really lonely position. Like I just remember sitting in my office, and it's hard because you don't really have people that you can lean on as much because you're the guy. And Trent's in a unique situation that he's known these guys for so long. If he allows it, he can lean on them a little bit in a way, in a personal way that maybe other head coaches can't, because they're not coaching with their former teammates. And so it has been an exercise of patience for some pretty impatient people this season.
Welcome back, or welcome to Y Option. I'm your host, Yogi Roth, as always, joined by the co-founder of Y Option, our producer, Jim Thornby. The latest CFP rankings dropped on Tuesday night. Here we sit in the back half of week 13. We've got rivalry games coming up here, traditional rivalries like the big game. Talk about that one. Call that one a few times. We've got USC UCLA, coached in that one, Jim, 4 times. We also have a budding rivalry in the new look Pac-12, Oregon State, Washington State, with some legit stakes, also some gripes with the committee, some questions for the committee, and always through a thoughtful lens out here on the West Coast. We are your home for all things college football. If you love it out West, we love it out West. Talk about that game, Jim. Oregon State, Washington State. 8 days ago, we were thinking this game is going to be for CFP statements. Washington State making a case. Not the case anymore. Both teams coming off a really tough loss. Oregon State, God, they're struggling moving the ball. They went up against a scheme that anybody will struggle against. I'd argue the same thing for Wazoo, going up against kind of a single wing quarterback run game scheme. Really challenging. New Mexico's quarterback was our 5-star QB of the week, Dan Pierre from last Saturday. But I'm curious for you, this one's at Reser. How do you see this one playing out in what could become eventually in 2 years? Maybe this game is the last week of the season, and maybe this game is playing for a right to go to a Pac-12 title game that might be a play-in game to go to the playoff.
Well, I mean, Jake Dicker said, right? Oregon State's not my buddy, right? Like this is no lot like I used the line earlier this week, from allies to adversaries, and I thought that would be maybe just like for the week, but maybe it's bigger than that. Maybe it's like, yeah, let's get it on. Let's be the hated rivals now that we're the two teams kind of leading this conference. But I think the thing that's going to be paramount here will be Oregon State's run game against Wazoo's run defense. I mean, we saw what happened with Wazoo's run defense, as you just mentioned this last week. They gave up, 360 rushing yards to New Mexico. Only the third time they've even given up over 200 this season. Oregon State, those first 6 games, the run game was killing it. 256 yards per game. That's obviously when James Griffin was healthy. They had Griffin and Hankerson and the QB run game and everything going there. Last 4 games, just 112 rushing yards per game. So can Oregon State get that run game going? That's how they can be competitive in this game. Otherwise, I think John Mateer just rolls.
Yeah, I'm with you. Can you slow the game down? Can you lean on them? Can you try to create a turnover? I think you also got to slow down the passing attack. You look at what Kyle Williams has done, Carlos Hernandez, like this receiving core just continues to evolve as they get healthier and healthier. We'll see how they are on the offensive line in this game for Washington State. I like how Washington State, I also like their backs. They challenge you as well in the quarterback run game, as well as they got a freshman who's playing at a high level. I think overall, though, this is a game that's going to have immense pride from both teams, right? Especially Oregon State. It has not gone anywhere near how they thought. I think the competitive depth has been exposed for this team just based on the players that they counted on being there in the spring weren't there in the fall, a couple injuries, and away they go. But I am a fan of what I think the vision and plan is for Trent Bray. If you missed that, take a listen earlier this week. It was really fun to hear his vision and really even how he reflects on himself as a first-year head coach of a program that he knows and adores so much. Of course, he played there. When he played there, He was coached by a guy who's our guest today, Nigel Burton. He is our conversation today. As always, every one of our conversations are presented by our founding partner, 76, keeping you in the know on the go, go, go. So if you're driving down from Portland to Corvallis, if you're flying from LA up to Corvallis, however you're finding your way to this game, put this guy in between your ears as we get to an incredibly illuminating conversation with a dear friend, somebody I consider family. Today's conversation with Nigel Burton. As mentioned, Nigel Burton, conversation always presented by our co-founder, 76. Nigel, I'm going through my phone, and I'm looking at like a year and a week ago, and I just see so many great photos of us together. So I know it's a big week. You're killing it on the CW. You got the Nick and Nigel show, but I need to pause on that. We'll get to the game. My man, we've spent so many Saturday nights together in stadiums. How has your season been? How is life? Like, I want a real-time catch-up on the show.
All right. Well, real-time catch-up. It's been a great year. It's been cool because for the first time in 26 years, I wasn't working every single weekend. And so I've got a chance to go see Jace up at the University of Washington and his team play probably like 4 times. I haven't been to 4 Washington games in 20 years, let alone 4 Washington games in a year. So it's been really it's been an amazing season. It doesn't feel real. And what people who are watching don't know, and I'm going to tell a story, I'm going to brag on you, is my son was committed to go to the University of Washington when Kalen DeBoer was there. He leaves, and utter panic breaks in our house because we're not sure like what to do. And I don't know Jed Fish that well. I don't know his staff that well. I mean, from times we were around him. And so I called you, and I was like, hey, man, like, we need some help because we need to know if Jed is going to, basically pick up where Kalen left off. And Kalen was amazing to our family and to Jace and offered him this great opportunity. And we wanted to know like if that was going to continue. And you held our hand through the entire, it was the first time in football, college football, that I was just a straight parent and I felt like I had no control. And thanks to you really stepping in and making sure that people kept their words. I get to see my son pretty much whenever I want, and maybe too much. So it's been amazing, man. We got a chance to be on the field during homecoming. And quick story you asked, so we're getting into it. The homecoming tradition at Washington is the former letter winners go down the field, form a tunnel for the team when they run out. And I remembered this, but it didn't connect. So I'm talking to Lawyer Malloy the day before the game, and he's like, "Hey, you're gonna be on the field, right?" And I'm like, "What? Oh yeah." And what I also didn't remember is your family gets to go down there too. So it's not just the former letter winners; it's also their family, their kids, everybody. So we have our blankets they give us when we get our letters from the University of Washington. I'm there next to Lawyer and his wife. My wife is there, and our friends. And I told Jace, like, "Hey man, when you come through, like, it'd be dope if you gave me a hug." He's like, "Dad, I'm not giving you a hug. Like, I'm not stopping. I go, "Okay, at least give me 5, like when you come by." So he's like, "All right." So he runs by, and my buddy filmed the whole thing. It's on my Instagram at Coach N Burton. And I stick my hand out, and here he comes, and he gives me a high five. What we didn't realize is as we get cordoned off the field, they kind of rope us off to leave through the team on the sideline. And I have this great picture that I will probably frame of us walking by and his mother getting a chance to give him a hug on the sideline right before kickoff. And it's just something that all these players, I mean, I don't know if you got a chance to do that at Pitt, Yogi. My mom only went to 2 games, like when I was playing at Washington, to have that memory of his mother giving him a hug. I mean, it gets me emotional, man, right before kickoff. And that was attributed to you, man. Thank you for doing that for us.
Well, I got the chills just, hearing that story. And I still have a voicemail that I've saved and will always save as long as my phone continues to work from you. And you know what I'm talking about there, man. A couple thoughts. One, it's senior day this weekend, right? You're calling what has always been a great game, but is now like a unique budding rivalry, right? With Washington State and Oregon State. And And I think of your son, and I saw that photo. It's amazing. We'll share it on Y Option social media as well. It is really cool to see that photo. And then I'm thinking, like, in 4 or 5 years, he's going to give his mom like a planned hug, right? And some flowers, and he's going to get all the things that go with senior day. And I remember mine like it was yesterday. And what I tell parents is something I don't need to share with you, but to the parents listening who are walking into senior day this weekend, in high school, in college, wherever you may be listening to this, the number one thing I think my parents missed most was a relationship with other parents. And it was really cool because football brought people together from so many different backgrounds. Of course, in the locker room, we made lifelong friends. Football brought you and I together. Look at us. Like, we came from different sides of the country, and now we're homies for life. I love what it does for families. And I hope that never gets lost amid the transient nature of college football, because coming in with your class, I mean, as a walk-on too, as you and your son know, and I was one of, I think, 2 that made it to senior day from that walk-on group. It's just a hard path, as Jace has already figured out and will continue to figure out. And if you keep competing, you'll find so many moments of success that are tangible, like playing, and intangible, like those relationships. And for families, man, like, it is like, my parents would go back tomorrow to they wouldn't even go to the game. They'd want to just talk and hang with the families and the other parents of players. So I appreciate you sharing that. I wanted to ask you about it, and I'm glad you brought it up, because it was fun, even for me in training camp, watching your son play, calling a game at UW and asking the coaching staff about him and how is he doing. So I can't wait to watch him in the spring, continue to grow there. They got one more game. I'll get to that one at the end, because I do need to get your thoughts on the rivalry game with Oregon before we cut you loose. But let's talk about this year and this week in particular. You've got such a cool role. You are a sideline analyst. You have been a head coach. You've been an assistant coach. You've been an assistant coach at Oregon State. Oh, by the way, where Trent Bray was the guy that you coached. And now you're down on the sideline watching a first-year head coach. Let's go to Oregon State first. What have you noticed? What have you shared in terms of shared experiences, conversations, as we as a country are watching him navigate this for the first time in a season hit by tremendous injuries and just challenging games as you've seen over the last month?
Yeah, it's been really interesting because there are guys on that staff who, I coached DBs when I was there, and it's not just Trent, right? I was there coaching as a young coach. I remind you, I was a young coach. Like, this gray is earned, but like people flip out there like, well, hold on, you coach the coaches? I'm like, yes, like almost all of them. Like, Trent Bray, and he was a linebacker for us when I was there. And, Keith Hayward was gone by the time I got there, but Keith and I are like family. There was probably a period of time there where if something happened to my wife and I, our kids were probably going to go with Keith and his wife. And so, Kyle DeVan, who was there when I coached there, Ryan Gunderson, I mean, his dad had a locker next to mine. I mean, at our club that we belong to, and watching Ryan grow through. So it's been really interesting because, like, I'll talk to one of them, and then I'll talk to Trent, and then I'll talk to Kyle and Ryan, and the thing I've kind of preached to all of them really is about patience. And it's really hard because all those guys are used to winning, and they're used to getting it now. And they were all fast tracking. I mean, Kyle was at Michigan, and Gunny was at UCLA, and Keith's been in NFL. And just the idea that, they have to be so much more patient. And it's funny, like, it's almost like your kids sometimes. Like, they didn't even talk, like, man, he's irritating the snot out of me. And I'm like, man, leave your brother alone, man. He's in a tough spot. And, like, here's how you can kind of navigate this. And being the head coach is a really lonely position. Like, I just remember sitting in my office, and it's hard because you don't really have people that you can lean on as much because you're the guy. And Trent's in a unique situation that he's known these guys for so long. If he allows it, he can lean on them a little bit in a personal way that maybe other head coaches can't, because they're not coaching with their former teammates. And so it has been an exercise of patience for some pretty impatient people this season.
He came on the show earlier this week, and we asked him about coaching the coaches, right? Players, they take losses hard, but they can move on much faster than coaches who are living and sleeping the profession and the craft like you did for many years. And he said the biggest thing is him, like, having to be disciplined to not be on the headsets trying to call the defense as well, like just being the head coach. What have you noticed around that. And you're a defensive guy too, and just your traditional background. Like, how hard was that even for you when you were the head coach at Portland State?
Yeah, I mean, I just kind of learned because there were a lot of guys smarter than me who I just saw like little things as a head coach, whether it's time management or manipulating the clock and some things that like you kind of lose when you're the play caller because you're so ingrained in like, okay, what's next? You lose the bigger picture. So I think what Trent did in bringing in Keith to call the defense, and he does like when you watch him on the sideline, you know what I always notice, Yogi? His mic is almost always flipped up. It's rarely down, which means the way those headsets for those at home work is when they're down is when you can speak. When they're flipped up, you can't speak. You're muted. And so it really shows the trust that he has in Keith. And I think it's been huge in being able to try to, your first time doing it, there's little things you're going to learn, you're going to mess up and some things. And so it's been nice to see, how he has kind of put all this stuff together and that trust factor that they have.
So how about Reser Stadium? Like, can you put into context of this season and what you imagine Saturday is going to be like as they play like what may become like a budding epic rivalry in the new look Pac-12?
Yeah, I mean, Reser has always been this like I'll never forget. You and I were there against USC.
Oh yeah,
maybe 2 or 3 seasons ago. They had half of a stadium. And it's not a big place to begin with, right? I mean, we're talking 40,000 people max, right? It was 30 something. And only half the people could even be there because they were doing the construction. And how loud that place was. Like, it was like the math wasn't mathing. The math wasn't mathing. Like, it does not make sense how a place could be that loud and only be half full. And so I think, this game, this weekend, I think is going to be, obviously it's massive and it's, the atmosphere is going to be electric. I think the Cougs fans are going to travel really well to this thing and support their team, even though obviously the really hard loss they took in New Mexico. But that place is pure energy. And whether it's the chainsaw and just the way they redid the entire stadium to where there's not any bad seats and they're on top of you. And I mean, it is just, it's a fantastic venue. And the fans are, I think the fans understand how difficult the task has been this year and really rode with this team. And it's really cool.
Yeah, I was telling a friend earlier today, like, you sleep at the Valley River Inn, and then you drive like 42 and a half miles, you probably fall asleep, and then they lock the gates. And then the chainsaws turn on, and it's a wrap. Like, they decide when you can leave. So you better be dialed in, and I'm sure the Cougs will be that. One more on Oregon State. Like, if they win this game, what do they need to do? What would you anticipate them to do as you're preparing to call this one on the CW with Ryan Leaf and Ted Robinson?
I think if they're going to win this game, I think one, they got to get their run game going again, which was really stifled against Air Force, in particular the quarterback run game, because that was the Achilles heel of Washington State in their game against New Mexico. I mean, New Mexico's quarterback went off, and I mean he is an uber talented guy. It was really kind of fun to watch him, even though obviously I was rooting for the Cougs to continue their run that they had. And so I think there's a lot of things that Ryan Gunderson can take from that film and say, okay, we do some similar things and we can maybe cause them some issues. I think the problem for him is the Cougs are a wounded animal. And you know what happens when you catch wounded animals? Usually it does not go well for whoever's trying to, put hands on them. And so I think there's some things they can take out of that. I think the other big struggle that they've had offensively is they really have struggled to stretch the field. And as a former defensive coordinator, if I'm not that worried about you throwing the ball over my head, I'm going to continue to really constrict my defense around your run game, your offense, kind of like a boa constrictor. And I can continue to just squeeze you until you show me you can do something to really scare me over the top. And so I think, Oregon State's going to have to do those things offensively. And then defensively, I just think it's been hard, man. I watched against Air Force. One of my former players at Jesuit High School, Tyree Blake, was starting at middle linebacker for them. He is a redshirt freshman walk-on who really they had moved to defensive end. He's now playing middle linebacker in that game because they are so beat up. So, I know they've been struggling at points, but I honestly kudos to Keith Hayward for the magic trick he's been able. I mean, he's been putting Band-Aids over gunshot wounds, and they've done a really nice job.
Okay, so let's talk about the other team in this budding rivalry. Jake Dickard and his team come off a brutal loss where they're up 28-14 at half. To your point, just can't stop the QB run game. There were times, at least for me, watching it, like there's just a gap that's not taken care of, whether that was formationally, shifts in motions, just struggle, right? They lose the game. They also have tragedy in the community. A 13-year-old in the neighboring community gets in a car accident, passes away, who's friends with so many of the coaches' kids, including Jake Dickard. Will be linked in the show notes for us to the GoFundMe account. We'll be supporting that. Already have here at Y Option. I know you and many others have as well. But it snapped them right back into reality of like, well, what really matters, right? So now they go into this game on the road. CFP, outside, they were always outside looking in, but they had an argument. Now that's not there, and they're going to compete for one of the better bowl matchups in the old school Pac-12 bowl agreements. That's the way it's still going to work for this season and next season. So for you, you've been a part of teams that have been wounded, that big aspirations were all of a sudden no longer there. What do you know about Jake Dickard? What do you anticipate him saying to his team, and then most importantly, seeing from his team once they kick it off on Saturday?
Yeah, I love Jake, man. He and I have kind of developed this relationship that, it was always one of respect, but he and I have had some kind of quiet conversations away from other people, and it's been really cool. He is a master motivator, and I think if I know him well enough, the first thing he's going to tell his team is, why the heck did we do this to begin with? Like, did we really come together as a team? Did we fight through all the things that we had to fight through just to be here, to be in the CFP? Like, that's not why we did it. What we did was we came together because we were here for each other. Well, we did this because we wanted to see what is the very best we can get out of ourselves. Forget all the other stuff. We don't worry about, and I've heard him say this so many times, I've seen the team meetings, I've gotten to sit on some things. It is not about anybody else. So it's irrelevant what happened last week. That's done. Like, we got to move on, because if the main thing is the main thing is the people in the room, and making sure that when the film cuts on, the film ain't going to lie. Like, did you give everything that you could? Did you act like a spoiled child that when you didn't get everything that you wanted, you stopped? Or do you say the main thing is the main thing, and we will continue to fight for each other, and we'll let the chips fall where they may? That's what I anticipate him saying to his team, and they respond to him like not many coaches out there in the country can get their teams to respond.
Okay, a big part of how they respond is because of their quarterback, John Mateer, who's a dark horse Heisman candidate, but he's going to be in the conversation. I'm sure he'll get a handful of votes when it's all said and done. I've watched him on film, watched him on television. You've watched him like at ground level. You've got this rich history on the West Coast in college football, and you've coached other places. You've coached all over the country. But when you think of like Pac-12 QBs and what our audience would know about college football through the lens of the West Coast, like, can you think of other quarterbacks that have had impacts that John Mateer is mirroring? Or are there other players that you've seen in your time as an analyst, coach, even player, where you're like, this reminds me of John Mateer?
Here's the thing. Mateer, he's sick. The stuff he does is sick. And I'm going to be honest with you, Yogi. No. Wow. Nobody. And I'm being honest. Nobody. You watch that game against New Mexico. I'm watching this dude sit back in the pocket, not have happy feet, and delivers absolute strikes on deep balls. And the toughest part about running quarterbacks in particular, when you're doing read zone, you're carrying the ball, quarterback power, you're getting hit constantly, like all these things, is to then all of a sudden be able to then, like, it's like being an actor, right? Going from being angry to then all of a sudden sensitive within seconds, right? Like, you got to go from this, I'm trying to throw these touch passes on the strike 50 yards down the field, and then I got to run over a linebacker. Like, how does that work? I can't do that. This dude does that. And I'm going to be honest with you, and I know this is going to sound like blasphemy. I don't even care. To me, he's so far ahead of where Cam Ward was at the same exact time in their career. It's not even funny. The dude is responsible for 18 touchdowns, and I believe in the last 4 games. He has 0 turnovers. He has 0 interceptions. 18 touchdowns and 0 interceptions is it's sick. Like, that's the only thing I can come up with, the word. And so, no, he doesn't remind me. I remember, Ryan Leaf and I would talk when we worked together. He's like, yeah, he reminds me of Jake Locker. I don't remember Jake Locker ever having a play where he's back scrambling, runs to his left, 3 defenders are there. He straight arms a D lineman, sticks his foot in the ground, and then runs and scores like he did against New Mexico. I don't remember that ever happening. And Jake Blocker did not throw the deep ball the way that John Mateer does. He just doesn't, which was really one of his Achilles heels when he got to the next level.
Okay, so you
yeah.
referenced you're a DC, you've been a DC before. How would you play in this game against John Mateer if you're Keith Hayward, if you're Trent Bray, if you're the Oregon State defense that we know is wounded?
Yeah, so here's the issue I think that Keith's going to run into. When New Mexico gave Rocky, I went way back. It was not Rocky Law. Bronco Mendenhall. What Bronco Mendenhall did at New Mexico really slowed their offense down. He went 3D lineman and did a cover 8, kind of a 5 underneath 3D pass coverage. And for some reason, they kind of struggled to adjust as wide receivers, even though that's what they do. And Washington State wasn't really able to run consistently against it, which really blew my mind because they've been so successful over the season when teams have done that to them. So the problem is Oregon State's weakness right now defensively is their defensive line. So I'm not sure that they're going to be able to pull that off the way that New Mexico did. But if there's anything in my mind, I would look to a 3-man defensive line, 1 extra guy being a spy, 5 under 3D, mixing some man. Because when John starts running around, man, good luck to you, bro. It's sick.
I love it. We need you to make sure you get a telestrator on the sideline for this week. Okay, tell Molinari you need a tally down on the sideline so you could draw a little bit. One more big picture covering these two teams this year as intimately as you are. I mean, your crew is lights out. It's aces, man. You know how I feel about you and Ted and Ryan. It's been real cool to listen and just feel like I'm hanging out with you guys during a broadcast. But these two teams, they've watched a conference be rebuilt in real time. Like, it wasn't like the season ended and here it was. And we know we're in a transient nature. You've got one of the, as I referenced, I think John Mateer is going to get Heisman votes. As a Heisman voter, I believe there's enough buzz. He might not have hundreds of them, but I think he'll have dozens of them, in my opinion. Jake Dicker, we know the job that he has done and how he's navigated that. How have you, if you could put into context, like, watch these teams navigate this while knowing the league is growing and the opportunity to get a pseudo auto bid in 2 years to the playoff. And we know that players' DMs are filling up left and right and coaches' agents are fielding calls left and right amid the context of these two schools and really probably more specifically the success of Washington State.
You know, I think you can go back. I talked to Jake about this before the season and actually before Cam Ward even left. He sat those guys down. He said, listen, you know, I realize we're in this like weird limbo deal. I feel confident about the future, but let me show you our schedule. And let me show you the schedules of some of these teams that left and have gone on to the Big Ten. You have to win. You at least have to go 10-2 to get in as one of those teams. Look at their schedules and tell me if you're sure that those teams can do that. Now look at our schedule and know that if we go undefeated or we lose one game, who has a better chance of getting in? You know what I mean? If you want to be a legend, if that's what you want, like, do you see a path here? And obviously, you know, Cam was looking for something different, but I think he shared that vision because he believed in it, and that's what they saw. I think moving into the future, I think he's going to be able to sit down with John Mateer and other quarterbacks that they bring in and say, okay, yes, you can go, whether it's chase the money or, you know, be in stadiums with 100,000 people if you want to, but where's the path to get you where you want to be, to get you in the CFP, to get you to New York City, to get you – we might get you to New York City as a sophomore in the Palouse in the situation we're in now, let alone when the hype train starts next year and everybody knows who you are and they see what you've already done, you know? And so I think those are kind of how those conversations are going to go in the future. And I think in the end, I think Jake is happy there. He knows that the grass isn't always greener and he's seen guys leave and it doesn't always work out for him. And so I think, I think that's how those conversations are going to go. And I really think it's on Cougar Nation to really show up and support them in a way that makes all those kids and those coaches say, I don't want to go anywhere else because look what we have.
Yeah, I think there's something to finding stability amid what seems like chaos. And I feel like that's what he and even Trent Bray has done, right? We know the Oregon State roster, there were many more players that left via the transfer portal. And Trent kept the core of that thing, I think, tight enough to know now you can go recruit to it. He told us earlier this week on Y Option, he said, look, now that we have a league, like you have something to sell, to your point, and you can sell like this path to the playoff that isn't dramatic, right? Like much more challenging this year or next year when you're not independent, but you don't have the same equity that other fully formed conferences have. So I'm with you, man. I feel that way about these two schools. I love the development of John Mateer. I think that's the thing that stood out to me from the beginning of the season and now. So Ben Arbuckle, of course, Jake Dickert and company. And I'm with you. I think that fan base, I'm an honorary Coug, man. Like I love what they have done and have supported that. So thank you for the candor in that one, man. I appreciate it. Last two for you before we cut you loose. When you get to the game, take me through what it is like to be a sideline analyst, because it's different. It's a different role for you. You've called a bunch of spring games. Sometimes you're in a booth, sometimes on the ground. But like this is like actual games with fans. And I'm just kind of curious what the profession has been like through your lens this season on the CW.
Yeah, first of all, it's November and I'm a tropical person. So like it's gonna be interesting to see how it works in November. But it has been fantastic, man. We kind of the setup that I have you remember the old touchdown room, right? We had our snacks, we had our TVs. It was great. I have a mini touchdown room on the sideline. That's the CW gives me. Straight up, yo. I got a little desk. I got a TV. I got my mic. I got my chair. Now, my chair does not recline. That's a bit of a bummer. I got a little cover in case it starts to rain. My guys down there, they bring me snacks. So we're good. We're snacked up. And then I get to just kind of walk and talk. Like I can watch the broadcast, or if something goes down, I can, I see an injury, I can kind of walk over there, try to see if, is the kid going to the locker room? Is he staying in there? Is he hobbling around? What's really unique, again, Jake and I have gotten tighter, and I know, Nick Edwards, and there's guys on that staff, that I've known for a long time. But the guys at Oregon State now, they don't get a choice. They play for me. I know their mamas. So I have jumped in the defensive like huddle on the sideline, and I'm listening to adjustments. I am standing next to the dudes like I'm part of the team. I jump into Kyle DeVan's O-line meetings, like, and he looks at me and he goes, and we just keep it moving, And so, like, I get information that I think other sideline reporters or whatever don't necessarily get, and I get to see the game. And the beauty is, like, we've set up a system where I get to chime in because, again, I get to see things from ground level. I get to explain, like, the back and forth chess match of the game. And then sometimes I get the intel before it even hits the field. It's been phenomenal. Now, ask me again when I'm in the Palouse on November 30th, like, if it still feels phenomenal. But so far, it's been super dope.
It's the Afterglow. Yogi Roth, Jim Thornby. That was Nigel Burton. As always, big thanks and much love to our founding partner, 76. Always a presenting partner of every one of our conversations. We hope that they're thoughtful. We hope they're insightful. And this one was special because Nigel's going to be on the call for the CW on Saturday alongside Ted Robinson and Ryan Leaf, and what will, I'm sure, be a phenomenal environment on Senior Day in Research Stadium. Jim, your takeaways from our good friend, Nigel.
Well, it's cool because, like, me and Nigel will always have a bond. I produced his audition. Oh. What was that, back in 2014, 2015, whatever that was, when he joined the Pac-12 network. So me and him have been together since the jump there. And I always give him, I'm doing it right now. I'm throwing him under the bus here, but I always give him crap because one of my all-time favorite plays in Arizona football history is the Ortiz-Jenkins leap by the lake. I'm sorry, Nigel. It just popped in my head here as we're talking. When you see OJ do the flip into the end zone, Nigel is the one just coming. There was nothing Nigel could have done, but literally, like, basically as Ortiz stands up, is right in Nigel's face there. Nigel's wearing number 8. So I give him crap about that all the time, but all love because Nigel's one of my favorite people. Yeah. And it's so cool to be able to see. I can remember, like, when he would first bring Jace down to San Francisco to, like, hang out in the touchdown room. Jace was probably like 12, maybe even younger than that. And now he's a walk-on freshman at Nigel's school. Like, it's such a cool story. For them to be able to come full circle with this, and I'm so happy for Jace to have that opportunity, but even more so happy for Nigel to kind of get to relive it a second time from a different perspective.
Yeah, I think that was my takeaway too. I think a couple things. One, like hearing his perspective as a sideline analyst, I think is really cool. I think it's and not a lot of broadcasts have it. Our broadcast team does, theirs does. There's a few others around the country. I just think it brings a different lens into every game when you have that. Some like it, some don't. Whatever. I love listening to him. The more Nigel and Ryan and Ted, the better for college football. I think to your point, my biggest takeaway is that here we sit in this era of like bemoaning, complaining, celebrating, screaming about the committee, about the playoff, about the state of the game. And I love when we can take the helmet off and provide some insight that these young individuals who are playing this game are human beings. They're not just recruiting rankings. They're not just transactions in NIL. They're humans who also have parents. And to hear from a parent of a walk-on in the stage of the game where it is now, and oh, by the way, at the alma mater of your father, and the rival of your mom. Like, it's just really cool to hear that insight. We did it a couple years ago. We had Big Dave Uyunglele on when DJ was on his way to Oregon State and Mateo was on his way to Oregon. Every once in a while, we'll try to continue to do that here at Y Option, just to remind everybody the human side of football. Sadly, there's also a side that I want to make sure that we also illuminate. And we talked about it with Nigel, what Washington State went through after their loss last weekend. After the game, they learned that Zion Bischoff had tragically passed away. He was a 13-year-old boy in a car accident in the Pullman community. Absolutely loved what Jake Dickert said after the game in his media availability. He said, Pullman is Washington State and Washington State is Pullman. And they're interconnected. And so many children of Washington State coaches knew Zion and vice versa. I had a chance to talk to a couple coaches as well, Jim, in advance of this recording. And it's just heartbroken, right? And also, of course, brings you into perspective on what really matters in life. I don't think anybody listening to this would argue that simple point. But everybody listening to this should just continue to support not only Washington State and the community of Pullman, but the Bischoff family. We reference it with Nigel in our show notes. The GoFundMe account will be linked there. I love how so many communities have risen up to support this family. You and I are fathers of boys. You have those that are either teens or preteens. My kids aren't there yet, but you can't even fathom it. You can't even fathom it. So we're going to always love on that. We made a contribution on behalf of Y Option. We'll continue to do that. And let's just keep supporting one another in times where we like to get competitive and debate one another. This one's not debatable. So please, whether it's $1, whether it's a retweet, whether it's posting it on Blue Sky, whatever social media platform you're on, like share the story, the Bischoff family, just to support them as they're going through something none of us can imagine. So with that, enjoy your weekend. With that, enjoy the games, because pretty quick you're going to be wishing your team was playing. Only 2 weeks left in college football if your team's not going to a championship game or not going to the playoff. And there's over 100 teams that will not be going to the playoff or a championship game. So go enjoy your team. Go celebrate your team. Don't bemoan your team. Don't light them up. Go enjoy the game that we all love. Lots of love to all of you. Stay safe. Appreciate the support. And I'm off to D.C., Iowa, at Maryland. Check us out, 9 a.m. Pacific. Only 2 games left. We're not going to miss a moment. Peace.